near public goods and the tragedy of the commons. We've been discussing public goods for the last couple lectures. That is, a good that is both non-rival and non-excludable. But in the real world, other than national defense, it's pretty hard to find an example of a pure public good. But there are a lot of examples of what we might call near public goods, goods with major positive externalities that operate society-wide and need a big public expenditure. Near public goods may have big public benefits that are non-rival, but have other benefits that are not completely non-rival or non-excludable. For example, a road network like the Beltway around Washington, D.C. Everyone benefits from having a good network for transporting people and products. So there's a big public goods element here, some benefits that are both non-rival and non-excludable. However, you can be excluded from driving on a road, so it is excludable. After all, there are toll roads you can't enter without paying, and there are lanes on the Beltway that you can't drive on during rush hour because they're only for multi-passenger vehicles. You've been excluded from those lanes. And at certain times of day, like rush hour, consumption of the Beltway is definitely rival. There's so many cars on there already that just try to get on yourself, you probably can't. Another example of what we might call a near public good, that is a good with big public benefits that are non-rival and non-excludable, in addition to private benefits, is a subway system. Everyone benefits through decreased congestion on the roads and reduced pollution when people use public transit. That's why there's a public budget support for Metro. But there are only so many seats on a Metro car, so it is rival at certain times. Again, rush hour on the Blue Line is pretty rival. And you can definitely exclude people from getting on the train. There are gates that you have to go through and pay in order to get on the subway system. And you can't get on unless you pay, or at least that's the way it works in theory. Another example of a near public good would be garbage collection. We all get a private benefit from having our garbage collected. So there's an element of garbage collection that's a rival and excludable. You have to pay someone to pick it up. They won't pick it up unless you pay them, so they can exclude you, and they can only service so many people a day. So it's rival and excludable. But collecting and appropriately disposing of garbage creates real benefits for public health and safety. We can't exclude people from these public health benefits, so it's not excludable. And the benefit I get from a neighborhood free of bad smells, diseases, and rats does not lower your enjoyment of those benefits, so it's non-rival. So we have a public element and a private element. That means that people may pay to have their garbage picked up, but some people might not dispose of their garbage in a way that serves public health and safety. For example, in some areas that until recently were rural, people may have become accustomed to just collecting your garbage for a month and then taking it out to the dump, or even burning it in your backyard. But once you start being getting some sort of population growth, that doesn't work anymore. So you might have to force people in some way to go along with the public good element of waste disposal, usually by publicly funding picking up the garbage or subjecting people to fines if they don't dispose of their garbage appropriately. So with many near public goods, we may pay the majority of the cost, at least initially, through the public budget. But we force people to pay a charge for use of the system as well. We have toll roads and fares on the subway, and sometimes municipalities make people pay a certain amount per month to get their garbage picked up. And we can vary those charges so that they are really only important during periods of high usage. For example, higher fares and tolls during rush hour, like happens on Metro. These are all ways of financing near public goods. But notice that it would, even though there's a private element to these goods, it would be difficult to initiate these projects privately. People would want to underinvest because they cannot be excluded from the big public benefits of a transport system or a roadway. Here's another type of good that that fits into a different collection of this rivalry versus excludability dichotomy. We call it a commons. And economists frequently speak of something called the tragedy of the commons. This is a particular market failure that exists when a common resource is rival but not excludable. No one can stop people from using the resource because it's not excludable. But they tend to overuse the resource because they can't be excluded from it and therefore can't be forced to pay to access it. So it gets used up over time. Because, in fact, it gets used up too quickly and used up inappropriately because it's not rival. That's called the tragedy of the commons. A good example of this problem is seen in fishing. If there's a public area that fishermen can go to, unless there's some sort of controls, they may overfish the area. And after a while, no one can make a living because there isn't enough fish left. This was a problem for many years out in international waters with whaling. Many species of whales were almost wiped out because there was overfishing of whales in international waters. Essentially, whaling was an activity that was non-excludable, but it was rival because it got used up over time. This is a common problem in commonly accessible resource